I never imagined that one casual Saturday afternoon would change everything I thought I knew about trust, family, and the quiet lines people cross without thinking anyone will ever notice. It started so small, so innocent, just a knock at the door and a familiar voice calling out. My son's best friend, Jordan, had come by like he had dozens of times before. Nothing felt unusual at first. In fact, I smiled when I saw him. I'd known Jordan since he was a kid, watched him grow up alongside my son, laughed at their teenage antics, even helped patch up a few scraped knees and broken hearts over the years. But that day, something about him was different. He stood a little too long at the door. His eyes didn't meet mine like they usually did. Instead, they flicked quickly to the hallway behind me, and then back again. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just having a rough day. He asked if my son was home. I told him he had just stepped out for a quick run to the store and would be back soon. I offered him a drink while he waited. That was nothing new, we'd all spent enough time together over the years that it didn't seem strange. But it was what happened next that made my stomach twist in a way I still can't explain. He walked in, slow and unsure, like he was testing the ground under his feet. Then, without warning, he said something that stopped me cold. He looked at me, dead in the eye, and said, "I know." Just that. 2 words. I stared at him, trying to figure out what he meant. At first, I thought maybe he was talking about a surprise my son had planned or something trivial. But there was something in his voice, quiet, edged, almost sad, that told me this wasn't about anything light or easy. My heart started to race before I even knew why. I asked him what he meant. He looked at the floor, then at me again. And then, slowly, he said something I'll never forget, "You know what I'm talking about." And right then, my world shifted. Because the truth is, deep down, I did know. I just didn't want to admit it, not to myself, not to anyone. And definitely not to my son's best friend. The thing is, I had made a mistake. A huge one. A moment of weakness had turned into something I never thought I'd be capable of. It wasn't planned, it wasn't romantic, and it certainly wasn't proud. But it happened. And somehow he knew. The room suddenly felt smaller. The silence between us was heavy. My thoughts were racing. How did he find out? Did my son know too? Was this the moment everything came crashing down? Jordan stood there, awkward and unsure, but his words carried weight. This wasn't just a teenage boy talking. This was someone who had seen something, heard something, or maybe just figured it out from the pieces I thought I'd kept hidden. The guilt I had buried deep for weeks came roaring back in a single second, stronger than ever. I wanted to deny it, to play dumb, to ask again what he meant. But I couldn't find the words. And he just stood there, watching me. There was no anger in his eyes, just disappointment. And that hurt even more. I had always been like a second mother to him. And now, whatever I had done, whatever I had allowed to happen, had broken something between us. I could hear the sound of keys at the door. My son was home. Jordan looked toward the hallway, then back at me. His face was pale. Mine probably was too. I didn't know what he was going to say next. I didn't know what I was going to do next. All I knew was that everything was about to change. And as my son walked in, smiling, completely unaware of the tension in the room, I realized something: the truth doesn't always wait for the right moment. Sometimes, it walks right in, wearing the face of someone you thought would never be the one to call you out. That's when Jordan turned to him and said, "We need to talk." My son froze for a second when Jordan said those words. "We need to talk." It wasn't the usual casual tone. It was firm, almost heavy. He looked between the two of us, confused. I tried to steady my face, hide the storm of thoughts rushing through my mind, but I think something in my expression gave it away. A flicker of concern crossed his face. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing at me, then back at Jordan. Jordan didn't answer right away. He just stood there, jaw tight, like he was still deciding whether to speak up in front of me or not. I opened my mouth, maybe to interrupt, maybe to lie, maybe to shift the moment somewhere else, anywhere but here. But I said nothing. I couldn't. The guilt pressed down like a weight on my chest. Jordan finally spoke, but his eyes didn't leave me. It's important. His voice was lower now. Quieter. My son sighed and dropped the grocery bags he had in his hands. Okay, well, can we talk in my room then? He looked back at me like he wanted me to confirm that everything was fine, that whatever this was, it wasn't serious. But I couldn't give him that. I gave a tight nod, pretending I didn't feel like I was about to fall apart. They disappeared down the hall, and I just stood there in the kitchen, frozen. My heart was pounding. I strained to hear something, anything, from behind that closed door. I imagined Jordan telling him everything, spilling every detail, exposing what I thought I had kept hidden. But how much did he really know? What did he see? What had he heard? It all started a few weeks back. My husband had been distant for months, cold, barely speaking unless it was about bills or chores. I'd felt invisible in my own home, like just a part of the furniture, something to be walked past. My son was busy with college and work, and I didn't blame him for not noticing. I barely noticed myself. Until he did. It wasn't someone random. It was someone familiar, someone who should have known better. A friend of my husband's, someone we'd had over for dinner more than once. It started with small talk that turned too personal. Then glances that lasted too long. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, it turned into something more. Something I never thought I'd do. I told myself it was just that one time, a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But the shame didn't go away. And the worst part? I didn't even feel wanted, I felt seen, and somehow that was enough in that moment. I tried to act normal afterward. I smiled, cooked dinner, cleaned the house. My son and Jordan came over to hang out just like they always had. But then, I started noticing Jordan looking at me differently. Not in an inappropriate way, no, it was something else. Suspicion. Distance. He was polite, but quieter. Watching. I started to worry. Did he see something? Overhear something? Or was he just putting pieces together? Now, in that moment of silence in the kitchen, I felt everything crashing in. I had broken a piece of myself, and now it was breaking everything around me. I didn't know what Jordan had said to my son. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew this secret wasn't going to stay buried much longer. Minutes passed. Long, slow minutes. I considered walking down the hallway, knocking on the door, interrupting whatever conversation was happening behind it. But I stayed frozen. Part of me wanted it to end, to let it all come out and just deal with the fallout. Another part of me wanted to run, to disappear before my son looked at me with that same disappointment I'd seen in Jordan's eyes. Finally, the door creaked open. I turned quickly, but only Jordan came out. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they weren't angry. They looked almost sad. He walked past me without a word, heading straight for the door. My son didn't follow. He stayed in his room. And all I could think was, did he tell him? Did my son know? Or was the worst yet to come? The silence that filled the house after Jordan left was worse than anything he could have said. Because silence, sometimes, says everything. The silence after Jordan left felt like it was swallowing the whole house. I stood there for what felt like forever, waiting, hoping, that my son would come out of his room and say something, anything. But the door stayed shut. I didn't want to knock. I was afraid of what might be on the other side of that conversation. Afraid of the truth coming out in his voice. Afraid of the look in his eyes if he really knew. I tried to go about the rest of the day as if it were normal. I washed the dishes, straightened the pillows, even checked the laundry I'd forgotten in the dryer. But every task felt hollow. My mind kept circling the same question: how much did Jordan say? And why now? Had he been carrying this for days? Weeks? Later that evening, my husband came home. Same routine, keys dropping on the table, phone buzzing in his hand, barely a glance in my direction. He didn't notice the tension in the air. Or maybe he did and just didn't care anymore. That was our normal now. Two strangers sharing a space, going through the motions. If he had looked up, really looked, he might have seen something was off. But he didn't. I wondered then, how would he react if he found out? Would he yell? Leave? Would he even care? I didn't have the answers, and that scared me more than anything. Somewhere along the way, we stopped being a couple and became a routine. That's no excuse for what I did, but it's the truth. The emotional distance had been there long before the mistake. The next day, I found a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It had no name, no explanation, just a few words scribbled in messy handwriting. You should talk to him. He deserves to hear it from you. My hands shook as I read it. I didn't need a signature to know it was from Jordan. And just like that, the weight of what I'd done settled even deeper. This wasn't just about a moment of weakness. It was about trust. About the kind of person I was when no one was looking. I had let my guard down. I had betrayed my son, my family, and even someone who once looked up to me. The irony of it all was that Jordan wasn't the one I thought would hold the mirror up to my choices. It wasn't my husband. It wasn't guilt. It was a 20-year-old kid who had known me since he was barely a teenager, someone who probably wished he hadn't found out what he did. Meanwhile, my son still hadn't said a word. He walked past me twice that day. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. No eye contact, no casual chat like we used to have. Just quiet, like something inside him was trying to decide if I was still the same person I had always been to him. That was the worst part, not knowing. Not knowing what he was thinking. Not knowing if the silence was protecting me, or preparing me for something I wasn't ready to hear. Days passed, and the tension in the house grew heavier with every quiet moment. My son's silence felt like a wall between us, thicker and colder than any argument could have been. Every time he walked past me without a word, it felt like a small crack was forming in everything we once had. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the fear of what might come stopped me. Jordan hadn't come back since that day. I wasn't sure if that was a relief or just another sign that things were spiraling out of control. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, the way he looked at me, so disappointed but also so serious. What exactly had he told my son? Did he warn him? Or just tell the truth as he saw it? The questions circled endlessly. One evening, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. My hands gripped the edge, knuckles white with tension. I could hear footsteps upstairs, slow and deliberate. My heart jumped. Was it my son? Was he coming down to finally say what had been left unsaid for days? The door creaked open, and there he was. No smile. No greeting. Just that look, the one that said everything was different now. His eyes searched mine, trying to find the person behind the mistakes. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice felt stuck, caught somewhere between regret and hope. "Mom," he said quietly. That single word held more weight than any argument or apology could. It was the moment I'd feared and hoped for all at once. I waited, bracing myself for the storm, knowing that whatever came next would change us forever. And then, just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Jordan. I glanced at the screen and froze. The words on it made my breath catch, because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stared at the message from Jordan, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The screen lit up with just a few words, but they hit me like a punch. "There's more you don't know." I blinked, unable to look away. What could he mean? More than what? I felt a cold sweat break across my forehead. My son was still standing there, waiting for me to say something, but all I could do was hold my phone like it was a lifeline, and maybe, in that moment, it was. The tension between us thickened. His eyes flicked to the screen, and I saw a flicker of fear. For the first time since all of this started, I realized that Jordan's message wasn't just about me. It was about him, too. And maybe even more than I had imagined. I wanted to throw the phone down, to forget the whole thing, but I couldn't. The weight of Jordan's words pressed on me, like a warning or a threat. Was there something else I didn't know? Something that could make everything even worse? My son finally broke the silence. Who is Jordan talking about? His voice was low, shaky, but steady. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I could see the questions building in his eyes, the confusion and the pain mixing together. Just then, my husband's voice called from downstairs, loud and angry. Something about a problem at work. The sharpness of his tone cut through the room, reminding me that I wasn't the only one hiding secrets. The truth wasn't just between me and my son anymore, it was tangled with everything in our family, and it was about to unravel. I looked back at my son, the phone still in my hand, and realized that whatever Jordan meant by more, it was going to change all of us. And fast. The silence hung heavy as I finally found the courage to speak. I told my son everything, the mistake, the guilt, the secret I thought I had buried. His face changed with every word, a mix of hurt and disbelief. But instead of anger, there was something else, a quiet sadness that settled between us like a fragile thread trying to hold on. Then he told me what Jordan had shared with him, the more that I hadn't expected. Jordan had overheard a conversation between my husband and his friend, the same man involved with me. It wasn't just my mistake anymore. My husband had been hiding his own betrayal, a web of lies that tangled far deeper than I realized. The house we thought was our sanctuary was built on cracks none of us had dared to see. My son looked at me, eyes sharp but steady. "This isn't just about you or Dad," he said. "It's about all of us. And we need to decide what comes next." For the first time in months, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The truth was out, raw and painful, but at least it was real. We could start to rebuild, or fall apart. Just when I thought the storm had passed, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jordan. I hesitated before opening it, my heart in my throat. The text was simple, "There's one last thing you need to know." I looked up at my son, who now wore a look I couldn't read, part hope, part dread. The story wasn't over. Not yet. I stared at Jordan's last message, my mind racing with every possible outcome. But this time, I didn't open it right away. Instead, I turned to my son and said, "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of unity between us, a fragile but real connection born from truth and the willingness to confront the pain. We decided to sit down as a family, all of us, including my husband. The conversations were hard, raw and honest. No more hiding, no more silence. We talked about mistakes, forgiveness, and the complicated ways people hurt each other, sometimes without meaning to. It wasn't easy. There were tears and angry words, but also moments of understanding. In the days that followed, we started to rebuild trust, slowly but surely. My son and I began to talk again, openly and without fear. Jordan, surprisingly, became a quiet support, reminding me that sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who hold us accountable and help us grow. That last message from Jordan? It was a warning about how fragile trust is, how one secret can ripple through everyone's lives. But it was also a reminder that honesty, no matter how painful, is the first step toward healing. Looking back, I know this story isn't just about infidelity or mistakes. It's about the power of truth, the importance of facing our faults, and the hope that even broken families can find a way forward. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that no secret stays buried forever, and when it comes to family, the hardest conversations are often the most necessary. 2.